Shall we get started?
Yes, let's get
All
started.
right. So, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. My name is John Neral, and I want to welcome you to our next Ask the Webinar series. I am honored to be joined today by Robin Merle and Maria Rosati. We are here today to talk with you about how to evaluate a job offer in these uncertain times. So this session is being recorded and a replay will be available for all registrants. That replay will be available tomorrow. So as some of you probably have already heard, we're having a little issue with the chat. You do have the Q&A function that is located in the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. Kindly use that today if you have any questions or things that come up for you or any additional comments and things. We will just use the Q&A. If the chat miraculously decides to work, you can use that too. But we will just use the Q&A for today, and certainly ask questions as they come up for you. One of the things we really enjoy doing is making this presentation interactive. And so just to get started, we just want to take a moment and introduce ourselves briefly to all of you. And Robin, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to everybody.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm glad to see familiar faces and also new faces. I am here in a few roles. I'm the author of Involuntary Exit, A Woman's Guide to Thriving After Being Fired, and I thank you all who have read it and welcome you to have a great experience when you do read it. I'm also here in my role as a former executive who has both interviewed people and been interviewed myself and had to navigate that process of, do I want this job or do I not want this job? And I will now turn this over to Maria for her introduction.
Sure. Thanks, Robin. And thank everyone for joining. I don't know if it's a good idea that we're all inside today anyway, because I'm assuming for most of us, you're in a heat wave. So what better way to celebrate a heat wave than being on Zoom with us? So, but, I will also say to Robin's point, we designed this series because all three of us are constantly meeting people in transition. And so we thought putting all of our best of our minds together would help others in navigating change, as we all have a different perspective. So I spent my career in corporate communications, and in the over 3 years ago, started my own business. And what I do is help build brands, personal brands and corporate brands. And so a lot of what I'm doing is, helping people define their narrative and reframe their narrative and who they want to be going forward. And it doesn't, who they were before doesn't impact where they're going to go ahead. So this whole coaching element has just become natural as an extension of my brand work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John to kick off the session today.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you both. And I am the host of the Mid-Career GPS podcast and the author of the book, Your Mid-Career GPS, 4 Steps to Figuring Out What's Next. And I specifically work with mid-career professionals to help them show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. And one of the first things that we end up talking about in our coaching session is about what job fit looks like, and specifically in terms of salary. I firmly believe that we cannot have a conversation about entertaining a job offer without immediately putting some filters in place about what you would negotiate with and what you would not negotiate with. For example, a lot of people right now, especially as evident based on what's happened during the pandemic, choose to look for jobs that are specifically 100% remote. And as companies are finding ways to get back to the work site and bring people back, that can be a non-negotiable for some. As human beings, we are very adaptable and flexible. While some of us don't really like change, some of us are okay figuring that out, but we're also creatures of habit. We get into routines. And it makes sense that as we go to evaluate a job offer, there are certain things that we're happy to negotiate about and others that we're not. At the end of the day, job offers are personal. They're a contractual agreement between you and an organization that I believe specifically focuses on 3 F's. Those F's are function, fit, and finance. The function is exactly what you're going to be doing in the role. What are the job duties that you're going to come in to perform as evident based on your expertise and your talents that you are bringing to that organization to help solve a specific problem? That's the function. The fit is how well you align to the company's mission and vision, the things that you're going to be able to do in the job that also identify potential growth or challenge opportunities or stretch goals that specifically align to where you see your career path headed, both short-term and long-term. And then the last piece is finance. What are they going to pay you for what it is that you're going to do? You are worth a certain value in the marketplace. And it is up to you as the job seeker and the candidate to know exactly how to strategically position yourself in the marketplace. You may have gone for a job and thought, I really don't want to interview for this job, but if they offer it to me, I'm just going to tell them $30,000 more and see if, and they're not going to say yes, but if they say yes, I'm going to just throw that out there. And then they say yes, and you're like, a gulp. Now what do I do? You have to be clear exactly in terms of what it is that you want and what you are willing to give in on or not. Whether you have believed in the Great Resignation, or I heard someone the other day call it the Great Employment Awakening, which I thought was actually kind of an interesting spin on that, right? Or another one is the Great Job Reevaluation, whatever you are calling it. There is a conversation going on, and I'm glad you are here with us today, where we get to really move this conversation forward to help you figure out exactly what it is you want, the things that you are willing to consider and the things that you are not, to help inform whatever your next career decision is. So as a reminder for anybody new who has joined, we're having some issues with the chat function today. So kindly use the Q&A box to put any questions in there that you may have as they come up. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Robin to continue this conversation with us.
And just, I was going to say one interjection, but John, as you were listing the terms for the Great Resignation, I heard another one today, which is very relevant to our conversation, the Great Renegotiation.
Oh, I like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm going to plant that seed while Robin takes over.
Thanks, Maria. And I was going to say, I love what you said, John. You framed it perfectly and set the foundation perfectly. Function, finance, fit. I think those are 3 necessary components to think about. But what I'm going to talk about is what's not clear and what's murky for us when we go for a job offer. So every job offer that we entertain is based on the biases we have from the past jobs we've held. So it's the same for somebody who's hiring someone. They know what they want based on what they don't want in someone new. So when you're going for a new job, you think about what your past job was. You think, well, I want something different from that, but I want something maybe in my comfort zone. And you're constantly evaluating what that fit is. So I talk a lot about what happens to you going forward after job loss. And I call it a little bit of career PTSD. I don't want to diminish the impact of PTSD, but so I'm just calling it career PTSD, where there are things that happen to you that you're on such an alert that you're looking for signs that your next job will not have this. The next person you're speaking with will not be like the person that put you in the situation you're in now. And it gets a little murky as you try to decide, do I want to stay in my comfort zone with what I know in a field I know that I've been in for maybe many years, but I was just kicked out of that job in that field, or do I want to try something new? And on top of this is the finance part. Do you need the money? Which is driving you more, the big bucks or the opportunity to learn new skills, engage your mind in something completely new, and in a sense, change your entire mental landscape? Now, this depends on your risk profile, but I will say 4 out of 5 people that I know, they choose to engage their mind and learn new skills, especially if they're leaving a job involuntarily. They don't want that anymore. They want something completely new. And they start to realize, John talked a lot about value, how much they've learned, what their skills are, and how they're replicable. And we've all heard that, think about your replicable skills, but really sit down and think about, quote unquote, the soft skills, because these soft skills are what I call relationship skills, and they're higher level skills, and they're skills that are highly valued as you move up the ladder. I also want to address the idea of negotiation and renegotiation. If you think they don't have enough money to pay me, be creative. Can you get an equity share? Can you get more PTO? Can you get any of the things that will drive HR executives crazy? But ask for it, because I'm telling you, companies are really struggling with how to recruit and retain employees. And if they don't hear from the people that are coming to possibly work at their company, they won't know this is what you want. John mentioned work from home. Absolutely. Put it down there. If you're the valued candidate, ask for different things that you need. Some people might ask for travel reimbursement. Some people, I jokingly say, ask for a car. I mean, just go to the heights of what makes your life easy. If you're in a negotiation position, don't narrow it down to benefits and salary. Think creatively. One last thing I want to say is that internal promotions are job offers also. And it has happened when people are burnt out and they're looking to move on. They've had it. They don't want to do what they're doing anymore. And somehow leadership is either on the same page, or they get a sense of this and they throw a new title and they throw a lot more money at you. I would say to use the same rules, like John mentioned, function, finance, fit. Even though you're in the company, you're going to be dealing with different people, different functions, different issues to make that decision. And this is the time companies have title, salary, all sorts of things to throw at you, to flatter you, to get you to take their offer. But think of it and think of what you have to gain. If you get a higher title, will that position you better for getting a better job on the outside? Do you need will the money enable you to breathe a little bit more easily so that you can, again, take up your search on the outside? So in addition to function, finance, fit, think about how it moves you forward. Any job, how it moves you forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Maria, and because I always love to hear what's on your mind, Maria.
I'm going to interject real quickly, Maria, if you don't mind, because we do have a question. We do have a question in the Q&A box, Robin. Could you? This is from Susan, by the way. Could you also negotiate part-time for the salary they are offering?
So you mean less hours for the same salary, right? You can try. You can try, and it might, and then you have to, then you'll start to get into negotiation of, well, what is part-time? And, and every company has an idea, 20 hours or, might be the part-time cap, but you can definitely mention that and sell yourself. And I know Maria is going to have some ideas about this. The value you contribute in those less hours, you don't have to be there physically to contribute that same value. They're going to be getting the same value from you in that time frame. That's what I think. Yes.
And to that point, though, I would also say, what does part-time look like to the company? So if you're scaling back hours, are they going to be texting you all, after hours? Are you going to be constantly engaged so that part-time really isn't part-time, and you maybe taking a decrease in salary for the decrease in hours? So I would also really, if you can, know the corporate culture or the style of your boss so that there is boundaries around those hours.
Can I just add, Maria, that the
Yep,
boundaries boundaries also have to come from you. So if you're used to being responsive every 24 hours or every time you get an email, if you're part-time, Maria's absolutely right. You've got to make sure that you live up to your own promises to yourself, that you're not on screen, you're offline.
Yes. And, so Robin, to your last point about, you said something about where the job is headed. And so there's 2 points I wanted to make. And one thing I see time and time again, and this happened in my own career transition, is I was in an industry that was under great economic pressures. The industry had changed, and most of our peer companies had to downsize. And so also with the advent, I was in financial services, financial technology, a lot of roles were changing. So I think we all have to be mindful of, where is our job going? Is my job going to be irrelevant in 3 years, or what skills do I need to keep relevant and keep ahead? And do those skills now translate to another industry? Or in my case, I was doing a lot more with content. So I started out in PR, but I more evolved into a marketing role. And that's part of my transition of starting my own company, was so that I could be reposition myself as a full service brand marketer. And as we know, a lot of headhunters have very defined, narrow mindsets. So it's really hard to redefine yourself from their perspective. So that's one thing, is always being ahead of the curve. And the other thing is, we've all, and for most of us probably on this call, come from a generation where our parents worked for the same company for most of their lives. And that is no longer the norm, especially the younger and younger the generation. So, the mindset used to be, I'm going to go in this job for 20 years. Well, maybe this job is good for the next 2 years, and take it at that. I'm going to learn this and take this away for the next 2 years. And then I'm going to start looking for the next thing. So I think one of the things that people get hung up about in taking a job is, oh my God, I got to be here for another 10 years. And I also have a personal philosophy that if you're in the same role for more than 10 years, you need to be ejected from your seat. There should be an eject button, because chances are you can do your job in your sleep. You're no longer challenged. You're not building new connections. It's become such a routine, and that's not fun for anyone. So I'm a firm believer that none of us should stay in a job, a role, or a company for over 10 years. And so with that, I'd love to get questions. I'm going to turn it back to John or Robin, but those are my key points, is really reframing what you're going to get out of this job.
Yeah, thank you for that, Maria. And just as a follow-up, Susan did say that, yes, that answered her question in regards to the part-time status and salary, especially if the salary is less than what you were paid in your previous job or what your expectations were going in. So being able to negotiate that, and Robin, to your point, it brings up again about being more creative in that regard. Yeah, Barbara just shared, Maria, great point about being too comfortable equates to being stagnant. Right. Yep. And I personally like the eject button. So that's fun there too.
Yes. Yeah.
Robin, could you just go back for a second and share with us a little bit more about defining what a risk profile is when someone's evaluating a job offer? Specifically, what might be some things that, from what you're seeing with the people you're helping right now and working with, what might be some of the things that they are considering or belonging in their risk profile?
So, for one thing, I think that most people do not know what their risk profile is, that they gravitate toward things they're comfortable with. And when something comes up that's a new challenge, or maybe out of the blue, or they hear from their friends that they've taken a step in a totally new direction, that's when they start to think, well, wait a minute, would I do that? And that question, would I do that, really starts you on that journey of figuring out how much risk you're willing to take. Now, I think I interviewed Deb Taft, who's the CEO of Lindauer Global, and she defines herself as a risk taker. So what did that mean? That meant that she was willing to jump from being a finance executive to the head of Girl Scouts branch, to different industries and different functions. But before, so she had a tolerance for risk, right? She had a higher tolerance for it. So, but before she did it, she wasn't reckless, she was calculated, and she would talk with her partner, she would talk with the people around her, and she would say, if this doesn't work out, we're going to be living with Aunt Maud over in, some town in the spare bedroom. And are you willing to take that risk with me? So when you have a risk profile, it also affects the people around you, right? So if you're the head of household, if you're supporting a lot of people, I remember I had a family meeting when I was going to take a new job, and it was kind of unfair because my kids had no idea what I was talking about, but I felt like that included them in the decision.
They were two.
That's right. I was inclusive in that way. But when I think of myself, I have a lower tolerance for risk than many people. And honestly, I think that's why when I wrote my book, I was so shaken in a way that, oh my gosh, this happens, and and it can happen to anyone. And the women that I interviewed were also shaken. They were like Maria, strapped in without the eject button, not like you, but as you described, where they had been 10 years or more at an organization. And I think that you could say that the risk profile was a little lower than it might be if you are like John and Maria probably have higher risk profiles than me, if you've been entrepreneurs, if you're used to change. And in the last, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and one thing to that point too is, I think people on this call might know, but I was interviewed for Robin's book, Involuntary Exit, and she met me as I was exiting my company. And so we talked for 2 or 3 months. And then we talked after I exited. And the reason I say that is when I was going through the transition, you're shell shocked, but 3-4 months out and you really process it. And this is something Robin and I also talk about. And I think John does a lot of work with, but reframing your narrative. So 3 to 4 months out, the shock is gone but some people have the PTSD that might be 8 months out, might be 2 years out. I talked to someone last night that they're like 3 years out and they still have PTSD about going back to a corporate culture. So, but I only needed about 4 months to get over it and reset myself, and it changed my risk profile. So I considered myself risk averse, and coming out, I became risk positive. But the other thing I would say to that is during this transition, I sat down with my financial advisors to see what my risk profile was and what I needed to do to get to where my goals were. And, we're all in different careers. We're across the age spectrum, but, from our mid 30s onwards, I suggest, you have an advisor and you have a plan. And that I always say is the financial freedom also adds to the risk reward.
Such a good point. And again, just for everybody who is with us again, so we are having some issues with the chat function, so please use the Q&A box if you have any questions. Jemima has posted in the Q&A box, what is the ideal lowest number of years you should look to stay in a job to be considered a quote unquote good employee?
I don't think there is such a thing as a good employee. It's like a good person, you just strive every day to learn and grow and make a contribution. But I would say, if someone sees turnover every 2 years on your resume with not a growth trajectory that you keep upscaling your roles, I think 3 to 5 is an adequate amount. Would love both of your opinions.
Yeah, what I would offer to that is, and I'll because I am looking at the Q&A box here, so I'm going to throw in this other question from Jemima. She said, "How open can you or should you be with the people in your current role about your hopes and career goals?" And Maria, to your point, what I would say is, if you have been with the company long enough and have had all of the conversations you believe you have needed to have to determine that there is not a path forward for you or sideways on that organizational chart to get you where you need to be. In other words, if you are blocked for some reason, I strongly believe that we have to know that we are 100% in control of our careers and do whatever move it is you need to make to do that jump. You control the narrative. That's the story you're going to be telling. You obviously can't go into a job in 3 months, be like, oh, there's no place for me. You have to understand that in time too. But if there's no path for you to go forward and move up, and your goal is to move up, get out and go somewhere else. Find what's that better fit for you in that regard.
And I would also say to that point, John, is not only what's the path forward, but what a raise is like. So if you did get an internal promotion per Robin, is it going to be flat? And is that even worth it? Or do you need to go out of the company to really make the change you want?
Yeah. So I want to answer both of Jemima's great questions. So I would say the minimum number of years is now a moving target because it has changed from 5 years ago. I would and probably still look for at least 2 years somewhere. And I think Maria's point's important. 2 years. And if you take a new job after 2 years, it has to be some sort of, escalation of what you've been doing. But I remember telling somebody that I was scouting, and she had just gone to an organization, and it was kind of rocky. And I said, come back to me after you've been there another year. She had been there 1 year. I said, I can't sell you to the other people around me if you look like you're jumping too quickly. And she did. And I did hire her, and she went on to become a star. However, now I hear from millennials that something that Maria said, it looks bad if you've been there too long, right? So it keeps changing. But I think the important thing is a year seems a little short, though. If you've gotten a great offer and you can explain it to whoever is interviewing you, fine. You just need to explain. So I hope that answers your question. The other question about how open should you be about your goals, I have a funny story about this. I think you should be very open. And when I ran staff meetings, I let my staff run the meetings. So each person would lead the meeting and have a theme. And one theme was basically, what do you want to be in your career, right? And which I thought was interesting. And I was invited to join. And each person talked about what they really wanted to do in their careers. And I was sitting there thinking, well, this is some shared vulnerability. Well, what do I do with this information? Well, I didn't know such and such wanted to do this or that. But it was really eye-opening and an experience I will never forget, because they were all sharing their dreams. And what's wrong with that? As a leader, I'm there to give them the experiences so they can achieve their dreams. That's my philosophy. And if you tell me that you ultimately want to do XYZ, and I can find a way for you to experience that in the job that you have now, I think I will do that, and I think others should do that for you.
Maria, what do you think about that? How do you think, how well do you think you should be open with people you work with in terms of your current role and your hopes and goals and such?
I'm mixed on that, and I think it's reading the room first, because from my experience, I've always worked in fairly small departments, so large organizations, but corporate communications usually never had more than 5 people. So sharing your dreams was more of a threat to others than it was a positive. So again, it's reading the room, it's reading the organization. Do they like people that, you know, want to reinvent themselves and push boundaries, or do they want you to stay in your lane? So I think it's more about reading the organization. What do you say, John?
I like that as well. What I would say is, if you trust the person well enough to share, then share. And Robin, to your point, if you have a team where people are entrusted to be vulnerable and share those things, that's great. Not every, I have worked in a place where I got thrown under a bus, and my goal was to get a bigger bus to throw that person under. I mean, look, as human beings, we are judgmental by nature. And so we don't know what someone's going to receive when they hear our particular goals, because it's their thoughts. That's where we got to put the shield up and everything and keep their thoughts away from us. What I would advocate for is find those 2 or 3 people you work with that you fully trust, that you could have a critical friend type relationship with, where you can go to and you have that trusted and that safe space and things, and use that as initial way to kind of read the room, to Maria's point, take the pulse, kind of figure out where things are in that regard. You know, and
also, John, to that point, I think you just made some good points. It's also, maybe you find a mentor. So I had someone that understood me very well and was a really good mentor, so I could have that conversation, and that person was pushing me in the right direction. And then they left the organization, and all the planning basically fell by the wayside. And that's really when I knew, okay, I don't have longevity at this organization. But if you can find a mentor who actually can make a difference, not just a peer, I would, be vulnerable with them.
Yeah. We do have another question from Ekaterina. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. I'm doing my best here. Besides talking to your financial advisors, what are other ways to transform from risk averse to risk positive profile?
So Maria, we're looking at you, since you made such a great transition. You want to kick us off?
Well, so I was speaking to someone last week that actually has an organization for part-time workers. So for even people like us that are in a career transition, and maybe you want to test the waters of a new career. So that's a good way to measure your risk tolerance of maybe taking on a part-time role while you're seeking full-time work. I've had a lot of friends that when they were involuntarily exited, did some consulting work, but knew that wasn't their long-term goal, or maybe they were getting their feet wet knowing they wanted one more corporate role for salary benefits, but wanted to return to that role, but wanted to kind of explore it and then come back to it. So I think that's another way, is dipping your toe in if you can, or taking on stretch assignments if your organization lets you. But as much as you can, expose yourself to different things. It shapes how you think. And then I think it does change your risk reward profile. What do you guys say?
I think that I totally agree. And I think that the way that I would phrase probably the same thing you just said is that gathering information is the best way to shake up the fear and to strengthen your risk tolerance. So I've talked with other people about just go out on some low stakes interviews, find out what else is out there because the risk may not be as great as you think it is. So you have to recalculate and you have to say to yourself, okay, now I understand what's at stake. I understand what change feels like, and that's a hard thing to master. So I would also say to look back, connect the dots on when you've made changes, and they may not seem like volcanic risk taking, but every time that you made a change, you took a kind of a risk, and credit yourself for that, credit yourself for taking that step. We all have enormous changes that happen in our lives. We have, job loss, divorce, relocation, sickness, all of those things. All of those kinds of changes to our routines and our patterns and the way we live our lives cause us to think differently about how to deal with those things. And we might have taken steps that we don't even recognize were growth steps towards our risk profile, and we made it through. And finally, I would say there's an exercise that I know that cognitive behavioral therapists ask people to do when they're concerned about this, and to write down what's the worst thing that can happen. If I do this, what is the worst thing that can happen? And then you sort of look at it and you realize, well, that's not going to happen, or whatever it is.
Yes.
And it makes you a little bit more risk positive.
It's such a great point. And we know that we all have different risk tolerance because we've been talking about. So in addition to talking to a financial advisor, what I would offer here is hire a coach. Hire someone to really work with you on identifying exactly what the risks are and how your brain wants to help you process those risks to determine that kind of decision in how you want to move forward. As a coach, what we do is we don't have any personal agenda in terms of what decision it is that you want to make. Our job is to help you understand your thoughts, process those emotions so you can make the best decision for you. And look, we all have support systems and we love them tremendously. They're also too close, right? You might have a spouse, a relative, a best friend that, they'll listen and everything, but they also might be a little enabling. And so we just want to be careful of that when we think about risk, because everybody processes risk a little bit differently. The other thing I would offer here is there are some fantastic assessments that are out there that can help assess risk for where you are and where you want to go. I just got done completing a whole bunch of 360 assessments for a cohort through the Center for Creative Leadership. If you are currently employed and have an opportunity to have your company invest in a 360-degree assessment for you, risk is one of those things that are usually assessed in that can offer some interesting perspective and insight for you as well.
Yeah, okay. I just want to add to that because I didn't address the financial advisor part of it. But also, John, I would say of 360 review assessments, they're good, but take them with a grain of salt. That's all.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't just say, okay, this is exactly right, because I remember having one and I remember the risk assessment. I thought, well, why are they saying that? But anyway, just take them with a grain of salt. But it's good to know there are assessments out there as a starting point, right? As the foundation. In terms of money, so I had a whole career raising money and talking to people about money and getting them to give money. And it's an understatement to say there's a lot of emotional things that happen around money. And so you may think that you do not have the finances to do what you want to do, or you're too worried, or you have a certain framework about it. I think examining that is really important. If you do that with your advisor, you do that even with a tax person, or you do that with a therapist. But to really understand your financial foundation from an objective point of view is important. It's really important, because even if you're making 50% of what you used to make, you're also paying 50% less in taxes, let's hope, or in your expenses. You have to take into consideration the expense side of the ledger, not just the revenue side. So that's all I'll say about that.
When it comes to evaluating job offers, for anybody who is on with us live or is going to catch the replay, if they're a service provider, a consultant, a solopreneur, what advice would you have for them to help them evaluate a job offer? And is it differently than what we've already shared?
Meaning, so me like evaluating who my clients are, or
so let's say that somebody has decided to work as a consultant on their own. They've left their corporate career, they're building a consultancy, and they're looking at new job opportunities or job offers to pull into their consultancy. What kind of things would we suggest to evaluate for that kind of role?
I think it really is, what is your long-term goal? So, one of the things I learned and is that I worked in mature businesses, and the problem with a mature business is turning things around or being agile, nimble, adding innovation, technology is very hard to do. So I gravitate towards smaller businesses that can pivot and are agile. I also like building the machine and not the day-to-day running of it when it becomes a routine. So I think it's really looking at what are these opportunities going to afford you to do, and what do you like doing? As particularly if you're a consultant, you don't have to take it. So, take what you want and just be mindful, what are you going to get out of it? So that's my thinking. What do you say, Robin?
No, I agree with that. I think when consultants begin, they may feel an obligation to take anything that comes along. But I think you really have to weigh, is it something you want to do? Is it something that'll help you learn a new skill? Is it something where you're helping someone in a way that you want to do? So I think the ball's in your court pretty much.
Also, to one of your earlier points, Robin, about the PTSD, what is going to help you get over your PTSD? So can you take on assignments that are going to chip away at your PTSD and, make you better off, so that if you want to go back into a corporate role, you've chipped away at your PTSD and you're ready.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah, absolutely. Jemima asked, who do you get the job offer from? Is it HR or is it an individual in a department? Job offers can include multiple people, especially at more senior levels. Who has the authority to make decisions when you ask for different options?
Okay, great question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a great question. So the hiring manager who's hiring you, the one who you're going to work for usually, is the one who's going to advocate for you. And so, and that person's going to go to whoever the functions are within the company. And if it's a search committee or the CEO is involved or whoever is involved, and advocate and say, I think we should do X, Y, Z because this person is worth it. and they're going to bring in their revenue equal to their salary, or, it is a sales thing. So the hiring manager is the one who's going to press your case. The actual job offer usually comes from HR on a letter, right? Because that's the formal way that they do the administrative work of job offers. But way before that, you should have done your negotiation. You should have heard back from the people you're negotiating with. You go back and forth. And I think one of the hardest things is the timing of all this. So I know one executive search person said, somebody will ask me for something special. I go, I talk to my client, the client says yes. I come back, they ask for something else. I go to the client says yes. I come back and they ask for something else again. They weren't happy at that point of having to negotiate all the time. So have your list ready, have your questions ready. It's okay if you don't think of everything at once, but just, acknowledge that and make sure you're negotiating with the people that are hiring you. And then my experience has been that the HR, they cross the T's, dot the I's, and make sure that the offer on paper reflects what you discussed. John, Maria?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm curious though, once you get that offer, do you negotiate? You get the dollar amount back. Do you negotiate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things too that I want to reinforce is it's about you. This is your next move. So
Right.
It's what works for you, not what works for the company. It's better to put it out there and get your answer, and you either live with it and take the job or not. But I think never asking, it's always going to be in the back of your mind that you could have had a better package. So, and I think within reason, sure, you should negotiate.
Yeah. But I would say, make sure you get the bulk of it up front. I mean,
Mhm.
I would prefer to have everything signed, sealed, and delivered before that piece of paper goes out. And then if people come back, I wonder, well, where did this break down? And then I have to go back again and start selling it. So definitely ask for everything you want. But if you forgot something, or if you want to ask for more, or if they came in and say, I'm sorry, we couldn't do this, we do that, definitely negotiate.
Agreed, right? The more you can get done ahead of time before that
Yeah.
final offer letter goes out, because especially when it's with salary, you can have that give and take as they're going back
Yes.
and forth to kind of, to your point though, we don't want to have any big kind of surprises that could break the deal down. Like you've agreed to 50% remote and all of a sudden you're like, no, I want to work 100% remote.
Right.
Not going to be your best move, right? If
Right.
you're really curious about the keys to the condo in Cabo, wait till you get in the job, right? those kind of things. Yeah.
Right.
So that's all right. We've got a few more minutes left. If anybody else has any other questions, please put them in the Q&A box.
Also,
Yeah.
while we're waiting to see if anyone else has questions, but I've heard from a few friends that they've hired people, the people have signed everything, and literally 2 days before they start, they say they're not starting. So that's an interesting phenomenon that I don't know if their companies counter offer. Some of them just rethink their decision and don't want to take the risk. But there is a lot of uncertainty out there, and I've heard from more than several people that people are pulling back after they've already accepted.
I have heard that as well. And when we were prepping for this webinar, it was probably a few days after we had talked about that I heard from a dear friend of mine who is a hiring manager and was just appalled that they were bringing on somebody and 3 days before they were supposed to start, they went, I got a better offer, and they left. And
Yeah.
I mean, we say all the time about don't burn a bridge, but the offer was that good. Okay. But yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
actually love to talk to people who have done that to their hiring managers, because as John's expression conveyed, it is not good. It is not good. And hiring managers have long memories.
Yes.
That's not to say that it's always going to be, there could be a good justification for it, and that's fine. Again, if you can explain anything in a way that makes sense to others, you're in good shape. But if you can't explain yourself and you're just like, well, it was more money and I, didn't feel accountable or responsible, then I would say as the hiring manager that the hiring manager dodged a bullet, because when I excuse that phrase, I shouldn't use that phrase, but I should just it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't a
Yeah.
fit,
Right.
right? It wasn't a fit. I wanted to make one last point if we have a time.
Okay, and we do have a question as well.
Okay,
so,
go
yeah.
ahead, John.
Okay. Ekaterina asks, can you offer some examples for how to ask for more money in a positive way? I used to say that the offer seems about X% modest based on my skills and value I bring to the company and on the market. Anything else? So I'll jump in. I'll jump in on this first, okay?
Yeah.
As you are negotiating, if you believe that the offer is not reflective of what your research has shown in current market trends, ask for it, and just simply ask for it. Thank you for the offer. You could say something like, I was expecting this dollar amount. The more you say, the more it opens up for them to assess how confident you are feeling in your value, and it is their judgment on that. So if there's a certain dollar figure in mind, let's say you were looking for 150K and they come back and they offer you 143, you might say something like, that's a good starting point. Based on my research, I was expecting 150,000. And then the hardest thing is, don't say anything.
That,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
that is totally right. And it's a basic precept when you ask for money, that you ask for what you need. And I think the way John phrased it is beautiful. If they come back, the other thing you can say, if they say, well, we can't do that, then you say, well, when can you do that?
Oh,
Right?
great
So
question.
the idea, it's never no, it's not now. It's like, well, good. Can you do that in 3 months? Can you do that? Give them a time and, and hold them to it and put
And
it
get
in
it
the
in
job
writing.
offer and
Get
get it
it
in
right.
writing. That's
Yes.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Get it in writing. Yes.
And also, if the offer's a little under, like the example John mentioned, you can say, well, is there a sign-on bonus? Because my number was 150 and it's not that different. Can we make it up? But I've also heard, I know in my old role, they used data from McLaughlin, I think it was called, or data on salaries, and it takes into account where you live and all that stuff. But the more you can show, like the average salary for a coder is X, and I have 20 years experience, so I'm expecting boom. And my last 3 offers were, any kind of data to back up your point also can go in your favor.
Yes.
Should you bring up inflation as a reason for more money?
Cost of living, I think you always have a number, you ask for your number, and include inflation in that number when you're thinking about it. That's how I would do it.
And another thing, I just came to mind is, can you ask what their average raises are? Because as we all know, once you get into the corporate world, it stagnates at probably 3% or just right to keep with inflation. So if you know that your next, if you're going to be there for 5 years, you're never going to gain more than 3%, you better get as much as you want up front. So I don't know if companies really offer that up of what their, what their raises are, or if they do give raises on a yearly basis. Some companies, smaller companies don't.
Right.
So I would throw that out there.
I love the idea of using data, and if it's an internal promotion, I would always say, well, it will cost you X dollars more to hire somebody new. And so you kind of want that amount of comp as well. Sorry, John.
No, that's no, thank you for that. I would hold firm to your offer. I personally, if I were actively job seeking right now, I would not bring up the inflation comment. I would bury that into my offer because companies are dealing with that too. Right.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you don't want that kind of backfiring and throwing it back at you. Michelle just posted a question, and Michelle asked, is it every good practice, or I guess, is it ever a good practice to use a second job offer to negotiate a higher salary for your first, or best to just focus on your value? It's a good question.
So Michelle, if you're talking about like a counter offer that you have an offer from someone else, right? And you're trying to get somebody else to raise their offer, that's mixed. As a hiring manager, I never liked being pressured into a corner. And I will tell you that unless you're really serious about taking that other job offer, don't use it, because you have to be prepared for the person to say, I'm sorry, we can't match that offer. And then you have the other job offer that you need, either you take or you turn down and you're still on the market. What do you both think?
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
same.
Yeah. Michelle said, thank you. Okay. Well, Robin, you had a point you wanted to make. Do you want to make that as we just go ahead and wrap up?
Yeah, real quickly. So, and I've said, it becomes a mantra because I've said it a lot, but when you're considering how to evaluate a job offer, to me, it's about the people, not so much the mission of where you're working, the field, but who you're going to work with and who you're going to work for. And this is especially important if you have career PTSD, that you're working for somebody that you think will value you, where they will help you make a difference and they will help you grow. So really be as perceptive as you can about your hiring manager, who you're going to work with, and your colleagues, if you are able to meet them during this whole interview process. That's my.
And to add to that point, we haven't really talked about this, but Robin and I were in a conversation yesterday, and I use LinkedIn like Google of work. So if obviously you're going to know your hiring manager, but other people on the team, are they active on LinkedIn? What are they posting? You can kind of get an idea of their personality, their points of view. So any kind of insights like that would be helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Well, this hour has flown by. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Really quickly as we wrap up, I just love for us to share how people can connect with us once again. So Maria, we'll start with you this time.
Yep. So number one would be LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm on and off it all day long because it's a very useful business tool for me. And the other one is through email, which is mrosati@eminence, EMINENCENYC.com. And I look forward to connecting with you.
Robin?
John.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so
ahead,
I'm also on LinkedIn. My email is Robin, ROBIN, Merle, MERLE, NYC @gmail.com. And you can also find me at my website, which is theprofessionalguide.com. John.
All right.
John.
And you all can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, and would really appreciate it if you would give the Mid-Career GPS podcast a listen. Each week we present different topics around career transition, and I'm honored to have had both Robin and Maria on the podcast as well. Certainly, if you have any follow-up questions for us, feel free to send them to us on LinkedIn or through our email. And we will be following up with all of you with the replay information for today. So Robin and Maria, thank you so very much. I think we had another fantastic conversation. Thanks to everyone who attended. And we look forward to sharing our next webinar with you really soon. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Thanks for joining us.
All right. And then if we can just stay on and we'll wait for everyone to just